All right, well, I'd like to begin today by telling you one of my favorite stories. It's the story of a 10-year-old boy who decided that he wanted to take judo lessons in spite of the fact that he lost his left arm in a very severe car accident years previously. So he begins taking lessons with a local sensei, and after a few months, he's doing very well, which is why he can't understand why he's only been taught one move. I mean, he looks around and all his friends have been taught multiple moves, even the ones who started after him. So finally he goes up to his sensei and he says, "Sensei, shouldn't I be learning more moves?" And Sensei looks at him and he says, "You know only one move, but it's the only move you need to know." The little boy is a little frustrated, a little confused, but he trusts his sensei. So he keeps practicing that one move just over and over again, diligently, until finally, a few months down the line, the time comes for the first tournament. And much to the surprise of everyone there, including the little one-armed boy himself, he's able to win his first two matches pretty easily. But now his third opponent is much bigger and stronger than anyone he's faced yet. And the match goes back and forth, round after round. But finally, the end result is the same. The little one-armed boy is able to use the one move he knows so well to pin his bigger, stronger opponent and advance to the next match. Just one problem. Now, he's in the judo championship against the two-time defending champion, one of the best youth judo fighters the town has ever seen. And the beginning of the match goes much like you'd expect it to. The two-time defending champion just beats up on this little one-armed boy, just abusing him, just toying with him, just round after round. It gets so bad that the referee jumps in, stops the match, runs over to the sensei and says, "Sensei, I'm going to have to stop this match. I can't let it continue." The sensei looks at him and he says, "No, he's worked hard to be here. He's earned the right to finish this match. You will let this fight continue." So reluctantly, the referee steps back and he restarts the match. And not long after he does, the two-time defending champion decides it's time to put this little one-armed boy out of his misery. And as he winds up for his big finishing combination, he makes one small mistake. He leaves himself vulnerable for just a split second. The little one-armed boy knows exactly what to do. With all of his speed and all of his might, he lunges forward, administering the one throw he knows so well, pinning the two-time defending champion and winning the judo championship. That night, as they walk home, the little boy and the sensei, they review every single move of every single match. And finally, the little boy summons up the courage to ask what's really on his mind. He says, "Sensei, how was I able to win that entire tournament with only one arm and only one move?" The sensei says, "Two reasons. Number one, you've mastered one of the most difficult throws in all of judo. And number two, the only known defense for that move is for your opponent to grab your left arm." Today I want to talk to you about limitations. First, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter. Please welcome my brother, Corey Wright.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I guess I should begin by placing that story into some context for you. See, it's our belief that we're all missing an arm. Obviously not in the literal sense, but in the sense that we all deal with limitations in our life. Maybe you don't have the money that you need to go start that new business or to pursue that great idea. Maybe you don't have the time that you need to get into the gym 5 days a week and have that perfect body that you've always wanted. Maybe you don't have the education that you need to get that new job or that great promotion that you've been working so hard for. These are our limitations. We all deal with them every day, and ultimately they prevent us from being the people that we want to be and doing the things that we truly want to do. And there are generally two schools of thought when it comes to dealing with limitations. We can throw the towel in and say, screw it, life's full of disappointment, and I'm just going to kind of try and keep mine to a minimum. Or we can decide that we're going to fight our limitations, that we're going to battle them, and we're going to overcome them, that we're going to succeed in spite of our limitations. But both of these approaches are flawed for different reasons. Obviously, giving up is never the answer. But the second approach is equally ridiculous for a different reason. You see, it's impossible to overcome our limitations. True limitations don't go away, no matter how hard we wish them to or how hard we work at them. There's nothing that boy can do to get his left arm back. There's nothing I can do to be 6'5". There's nothing you can do to be 20 IQ points higher or 20 years younger. These are our limitations, and they will be with us for the rest of our lives. And to suggest that we should or somehow can overcome these, it just really isn't fair to us. But there's a third approach, a third path. It's the path that sensei put the one-armed boy on, where rather than try and ignore or defeat or overcome our limitations, we understand our limitations and we embrace them and we use them as competitive advantages. Today we're going to take a look at famous artists, inventors, and business people throughout history who have done exactly this. And as we begin to show you how great innovators have been able to leverage their limitations to catapult them into success, you will begin to see new possibilities within your own life. Possibilities to embrace limitations as a path to achievement.
All right, so there are a million different ways to embrace limitations. We're going to focus on 3 of them. First, we're going to take a look at an artist who embraced limitations as a path to greater creativity. Next, we'll take a look at a pair of inventors who have embraced limitations as a path to greater productivity. And finally, we'll take a look at a group of businesses who have embraced limitations as a path to greater purpose and, in turn, greater profits. So 3 unique stories to connect us to one big idea. First, let's take a look at an artist who has embraced limitations as a pathway to greater creativity.
Back in the early 90s, London saw a big rise in graffiti art. But not in the traditional territorial graffiti where you'd spray paint your name, but rather a new movement known as street art. Now, street art is very similar to traditional graffiti in the sense that it's generally not sanctioned by the owner or of the property or the government, but it's very different in its purpose. You see, street art aims to beautify the space rather than to vandalize the space. I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Essentially, it's a way for these very skilled and talented artists to display their love of art and their passion and their skill publicly for everybody, outside of the traditional limitations of a studio or a gallery, which many people like myself might never ever step foot into and get to appreciate. It's been an extremely growing movement over the last 2 decades, and it's seen many very talented artists make a name for themselves. But today we don't want to talk about one of the most famous, but rather, or one of the most skilled, but one of the worst.
Right. Now you might be wondering what makes a bad street artist. There are actually a lot of style and technical elements which we won't even pretend to understand. But the reason that this particular street artist is bad is because he was slow. It would take him hours to finish a single design. And this is a really big problem for a street artist because street art is illegal. So the longer it takes you to finish a design, the better chance there is of you getting arrested, which generally isn't the best career move. The best parallel that I can give you is that being a slow street artist would be sort of like being a clumsy bomb diffuser. You know, it's just 2 things that really shouldn't go together.
Luckily, while this street artist was slow with his paint can, he was pretty quick on his feet. So he generally got away from the cops and didn't go to jail. But he almost never got to finish his work. And one night he recalls after he had escaped from the police, and he's sitting next to a city dumpster, and he's just staring at this dumpster, and he sees some stenciled on words. And he's just staring for this, waiting for the cops to leave, and all of a sudden he has this revelation, and it hits him. Stencils. Stencils were the answer. And from that day forward, stencils became the basis for all of this artist's work.
Now, stencils are ideal for a slow street artist for several reasons. First of all, stencils allow you to do all of your design work in private, legally. So suddenly that risk of getting caught goes out the window. And now that you don't have to worry about getting caught, you can spend a lot more time on each design. Like days, weeks, months, even years on a single design. So you can do designs that are more intricate, more elaborate, more challenging. The design quality goes through the roof. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, since stencils allow you to put up a design flawlessly in a matter of seconds, it means that you can put your designs in far more public places without much risk of getting caught, which means that a lot more people are going to see your art. And so with these 3 unique advantages, all born out of a single limitation, the world's most famous street artist was born. His street name is Banksy. Let's take a look at some of his work.
This is one that was put up in New Orleans just after the floods. This is one that's said to be possibly a self-portrait. He does just amazing work all over the world. And as you can see, stencils are really the underlying feature of all of his works. Banksy is not your typical artist, street or not. He is clever, he is thought-provoking, he's satirical. But without the use of stencils, he would have never been able to finish his works, and we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about him. His influence now is global. His works are featured in museums and on buildings throughout the world and sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's a book about him, and a DVD was just released at the Sundance Film Festival that documents what he does. He is an internet and a pop culture icon. He has thousands of devoted fans online who categorize and interpret his works. But perhaps his greatest influence or his greatest achievement is that he's legitimized street art. And he's inspired thousands of new artists to take their art to a new level. And while I'm not promoting graffiti, I think that Banksy is a clear example of somebody who was able to embrace their limitation as a path and use it as a competitive advantage to become more creative. Next, let's take a look at somebody who was able to embrace their limitation to become more productive. Let's take a look at the Wright brothers.
Not us. Orville and Wilbur. No, I know it's a little bit on the nose for the Wright brothers to be talking about the Wright brothers, but it really is a good story, so just go with us on this. Now, the Wright brothers are the first team to get a plane up in the air, and they do this against all odds, right? They have no formal funding, they have no expert training and assistance, and they're both working full-time jobs at the same time they're working on the problem of flight. Now, at the same time, you have several government-sponsored teams, all with immense funding, a sea of experts, and a several-year head start on the Wright brothers. But all of these teams end up losing to the Wright brothers. And I think the big question is, why?
Or perhaps the better question is, why did they persist with this quest, with the knowledge that there were so many other better resourced, better educated teams working on the exact same problem? I mean, it'd be like Casey and I going out and trying to build the next iPhone with a couple pieces of scrap metal and a sunglass repair kit. I think it's safe to say Apple's going to get there first. But you see, this was the genius of the Wright brothers. They didn't ignore their limitation. They embraced their limitation.
Right, now we've all seen these famous photos of the Wright brothers with their glider experiments, but these photos are a little bit misleading because they make it seem like the Wright brothers solved the problem of flight in the field with these glider experiments. And that's just simply not true. In fact, if you look at the Wright brothers' journals, you find that only a small fraction of the information they found about flight actually comes from these glider experiments. I think it's very safe to say that if the Wrights had to solve the problem of flight using only the information they could obtain from these glider experiments, there's no way they would have gotten a plane in the air before the other teams. Keep in mind, these other teams, they have more money, they have more people, and they can build a dozen gliders for every one that the Wright brothers can build. And at this pace disparity, there's no way the Wright brothers would be able to catch up to the other teams. And nobody understands this limitation better than the Wright brothers.
So after a few expensive and time-consuming glider debacles, the Wright brothers decided it's time to give up on actual gliders and to pursue a much more budget-conscious approach. So they decide that they're going to build a 6-foot wind tunnel right in their bicycle shop, made out of hacksaw blades and bicycle chains and scrap metal and pretty much anything that they can get their hands on. And as soon as they have this built, it unlocks an entirely new world for the Wright brothers. Because now they can start to test all sorts of wing designs and steering systems in a perfectly controlled environment where they didn't have to account for wind and weather fluctuations. And because they were so much easier and cheaper to build, they could literally build and test dozens of models every single week, putting them well ahead of pace of even the most well-resourced research teams. Well, after just a few months of the Wright brothers doing their wind tunnel experiments, they had unlocked flight. They had mastered the wing design and perfected the 3-axis steering system, which is still to this day the basis for every modern plane.
Right, and soon the Wrights would find out, along with the rest of the world, that once you master wing design and control, the rest is pretty easy. They built a glider based on their successful wind tunnel test, slapped an engine on it from a local mechanic, and on December 17th, 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wright brothers became the first team to successfully fly and control an airplane. December 17th, 1903, that's the date that goes down in history books. But the real moment of discovery occurred several months earlier, when the Wright brothers embraced their limitation and built a wind tunnel. That was the secret weapon, the one experimental tool that allowed them to accelerate the pace of their research and leapfrog all of the other teams. It's the wind tunnel. Simple, small, built out of scrap metal. It's the wind tunnel that is the true birthplace of flight.
All right, for our final example of somebody who was able to embrace their limitation and turn it into a competitive advantage, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things. We're going to talk about food. If you couldn't tell, I'm well qualified to talk about food.
He loves to eat.
It's true. But after a recent trip to the DMV where a DMV employee, this is not a joke, told me that I was an unhealthy weight and proceeded to give me a 3-minute heart-to-heart after I just told him how much I weigh for my driver's license, I thought maybe it's time that I start eating a bit healthier. So in my quest to start eating healthier over the last several months, I've realized that healthy food is sometimes just a code word for food that tastes really bad. But I've also found that eating healthy can really make you feel good when it's done right. It's all about kind of finding that right place. And I first realized this when I stepped foot into a local food joint down in San Diego called Tender Greens. Now, Tender Greens is a Southern California-based restaurant. They specialize in healthy and organic food. And Casey, I think you'll go with me on this. The food at Tender Greens is absolutely amazing.
Absolutely amazing. I really would encourage you, next time you're in California, make it stop at Tender Greens. You won't regret it. Absolutely fantastic food. But we're not here today to promote a restaurant, although it might sound like that. Although I really do hope somebody from Tender Greens is watching this video and considers giving us a lifetime supply of free food for this generous plug. But that's really not the reason we're doing this. Or I should say that's only part of the reason we're doing this. The real reason we're doing this is because, or talking about Tender Greens, is because Tender Greens is part of a growing movement within the restaurant industry that seeks to define restaurants by their limitations. So for instance, Tender Greens uses only organic produce from local farms. They use only wild fish from California oceans. They use only grass-fed beef from California ranches. They serve only local wines, serve only local beers, display art only from local artists. These are limitations. They're self-imposed limitations, but they are limitations. They limit the company's ability to expand nationally. They limit its profit margins. They limit its menu options. But that's not all they do. They also send a clear message to anybody who walks through the door at Tender Greens that Tender Greens is different. Tender Greens cares. Tender Greens has a purpose beyond just making money.
So how is all this working out for Tender Greens? Let's put it this way. Next time you're in Southern California, if you make your way to a Tender Greens, and I'd encourage you to do so, expect a line out the door. And part of this is because of the food. I mean, I touched on earlier, the food is amazing. But there is a lot of amazing food in San Diego, right? Tender Greens' success far outpaces the quality of its food. And the reason is very simple. The reason is because Tender Greens' success is a direct result of the limitations that it's imposed on itself. Because people understand that when they eat at Tender Greens, they're doing more than just going there to get a meal. They're making a statement. Maybe in your town it's a kosher deli or a vegan bakery or a gluten-free pizza joint. And it's not just limited to food. Maybe it's a company that uses 100% recycled materials. Or maybe they only employ labor inside of the United States. Or maybe they close on Sunday to observe the Sabbath. What makes all of these businesses so unique and what sets them apart from the other examples that we've talked about today is that all of these limitations are self-imposed. See, the gluten-free pizza joint doesn't make gluten-free pizza because they don't have access to gluten, right? I mean, they make it so they can connect with a customer base who values gluten-free food. Self-imposed limitations are a clear way to embrace that limitation as a part of your purpose.
Right, now, we talked about 3 different people who've embraced limitations today. If we had more time, we really could have talked about thousands. Once you start to view the world this way, once you start to see that every single great human achievement is born out of a great human limitation, you'll start to see this principle play everywhere you look. So, for instance, all of the world's most innovative companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, they all started in garages and dorm rooms.
Jimi Hendrix's unique sound and unique style of playing guitar is a direct result of his inability to find a left-handed guitar when he started playing. So he took a right-handed guitar, flipped it upside down, and the Jimi Hendrix sound was born.
Most art critics and historians believe that Van Gogh's unique, almost manic style is a direct result of an undiagnosed mental illness.
History is full of examples just like this, and I promise you, the future will be full of them too.